Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode of the Dr. Will Show, the mobile university for entrepreneurs. This is the business podcast for educators who want to learn how to turn what they do into what they are known for. I bring on educators, entrepreneurs, authors, and change makers, and we talk about how you can build, launch, leverage, and scale in education business. So today, people, you are in for a treat. I want you to grab your iPad, pencil and paper, whatever you do to take some notes and grab your favorite beverage. Today, our guest is Leigh Toomey, and we're going to be talking about how she has built this amazing education company. So for those who be listening on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Simplecast, Spotify, and Audible, will you please introduce yourself, Leigh?
Thank you. Thank you. That was a lovely introduction by you. My name is Leigh Toomey, and I am the CEO and founder of Lead Hership Educational Solutions, which is a consulting and coaching business for women leaders in education. That's primarily my base. However, I am now expanding into just women in leadership in business as well, because some of the skill sets that I'm consulting and coaching on are transferable in any form for a senior executive that is a woman.
All right. So I'm always curious as to how people got to where they are. What did you think you'll be doing when you were growing up? And how did you find yourself in education?
That is such a great question. What I thought I was going to be doing when I was growing up actually was to be a teacher. I had always wanted to be a teacher. I was a product of public school, a very large public school. I think I met with my guidance counselor once, and they encouraged me to go into business instead because there were no teaching jobs available. And so that's exactly what I did. So I ended up going to school for business, and I attained an MBA, and then I actually went into business. And then I call my second career actually my passion, which was education. I had always wanted to be a teacher, so I became a teacher. I got a master's in teaching, and I taught a plethora of things all the way from literally kindergarten through 12th grade. And that's a much longer conversation, and there's a lot of stories around that for sure. And then I had a really great mentor who said to me, you would be a good administrator. You could marry your business background with your love for education, and you could help more students in the process. And so that's what I did. And then I transferred into administration and actually went from public school into an independent school market in administration levels. Had been everything from middle school director to fine arts director, interim fine arts director at one point in my career, to finally working my way up the ladder and ending as a head of school for an independent school.
Excellent. So, as you've mentioned, you have this breadth of experience from pharmaceutical sales to head of school to now running your own coaching and consulting company. At what point did you realize that there was an urgent problem that nobody was seeing when it came to women in leadership?
I would say the aha moment for me was actually when I was a mid-level manager and I was sitting in a senior leadership meeting, and we were doing a lot of conversation around budgeting and financing and timelines and operations, and looking around the room at the three other women that were sitting in the room with me who had blank stares on their faces and had no idea what the men in the room were talking about. The reason why I knew what the men in the room were talking about was because I had that prior knowledge base. And so that was my aha moment that, oh, geez, women that come up through the teaching side and work their way into these positions are really at a disadvantage. And then fast forward to when I was actually a head of school, I inherited an all-female leadership team, which was probably one of the best experiences of my life. But most of them did not actually understand the roles that they were in because they were relatively new to those roles. And so there is just this huge gap in education. Women are often mentored and relational things. They become team leads, right? We're good at relationships. We don't need to be mentored on that. That's just if anyone's listening and they're thinking about promoting women, we don't need to be mentored in leadership skills like that, relational skills. We need to be mentored in finances and operations and marketing and how admissions actually works, right? And how do you do a facilities audit? How do you manage up to a board? Those are the things that we actually need to be mentored in, not the soft skills. We're already good at the soft skills.
So you describe watching women in schools, and you mentioned this lack the opportunity to master the business side. How did that observation turn into a service that people would pay for?
That's a great question. So it really wasn't an observation. It was, I actually retired and I left the field of education. And in that very short amount of time, I started getting phone calls from female colleagues of mine, and they were asking me all kinds of questions. For instance, the board has asked me to run a capital campaign. I have no idea where to even start about doing that. How do I build a building for my school, right? I've done two. So I was having a lot of conversation, and those women were referring other women to me. And so I'm happy to have, and I'm serious. I love to talk, and I love to talk with other women about, certainly about one, education, and two, positioning themselves. But I was sort of just having these conversations all the time. And then I just thought, wow, this probably could be a business. There's just such interest here. This probably could turn into something.
So a lot of entrepreneurs think they know their client's problem, but they're actually solving the symptom. How
Mhm.
did you get deep enough into the pain of women leaders in independent schools to build something that actually hits the root issue?
Well, I would say for me, living it, right? So I have that personal experience. I know those pain points. I know it being in certain positions that I actually didn't have the background that I needed for a certain task or project that was given to me. Right. And so I actually had to go out and do some professional development of my own to get skill sets that I didn't even have. So I could only imagine someone that didn't have an underpinning of understanding having to do this from the ground up, and what a steep climb that would actually be.
How do you communicate with your clients when someone comes to you and with that and they're thinking that, hey, this is where I'm lacking in, or this is what
Mhm,
I need, but you know that it is different. How do you tell sort of pinpoint them or show
mhm.
them that, okay, I hear what you're saying, but what you actually need is this?
That's a skill that I've honed throughout the years, right? So, as an administrator in a school, you're always evaluating not just teachers, but you're evaluating your staff, and a lot of that evaluation is actually growth, right? You're looking for areas of growth for people so that they can turn into the best versions of themselves. So that's a skill set that I already had. What I do in my business is that generally any conversation, if you're interested in working with me, that goes into a 30-minute to an hour phone call where we're sort of diving into what they feel they need. And if in that conversation, I'm asking a lot of probing questions, and sometimes it turns out that I'm actually not what they need. And I can recognize that, and I can refer them on to someone who can do that skill set. For instance, I was having a conversation with a woman head of school, and she was talking about fundraising, and we were having sort of conversation around that. And in that conversation, we really brought out the fact that it really wasn't about fundraising. It was about the culture of philanthropy in their school. And that really was a board governance issue. And I don't do board governance. So I can easily refer them to somebody who that they can find and use as a resource.
So you built your business around coaching, consulting, and courses and cohorts.
Yeah.
Let's call it the four C's. Walk us through how you describe which of these you offer first, like which one came first, and how did you
Okay.
position yourself in the market?
Okay. So consulting came first because that's really my base, right? I'm consulting on things that I have 25 plus years experience in, a plethora of degrees in, right? Do workshops on. I'm pretty confident in the understanding of how things work, and that I can consult someone if they have a pain point or an issue that they need to address. So that obviously came first. Coaching, I wanted to delve into because sometimes consulting transitions over into coaching. And so in order for me to feel like I had the skill set in order to do that, I actually took a year and became an ACC ICF certified executive coach, because coaching and consulting are actually very, very different worlds, but sometimes they mesh, right? So in order for me to really understand what the client's needs were, I felt I needed, again, this is what educators do, right? They seek out understanding. I felt that I needed to have the coaching side of it as well. And so that's what I did. And then from there, A lot of conversation that women were expressing to me from my client base were just, and this is just the truth. When you get into these senior leadership roles, they're very isolating. It's a little bit different for women because women in these roles generally have families. They have a lot of outside responsibilities in the school. So they're not golfing with other women on Sundays, right, to build their community. So often they're very isolating roles. And so my goal of the cohorts was not only to be able to give information, a broad stroke of information, but it really was to create a network for other women to have so that when they leave me, they've already established relationships with maybe 3 or 4 other people in that cohort. And then hopefully they can be lifelong partners and walk through the journey together. And that makes me feel really proud and wonderful that I established that connection for them. Courses are new. That's a new thing that I'm working through. I'm in the process of finalizing a book, and from that book, delegating, I'll have some courses that branch out from that book.
Courses are very interesting to me because generally they provide a lower touch point
Mhm.
with the client. How are you making sure that your courses will be of a premium value for your customers and not just a watered down version of what you do?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I don't ever, if I don't know if you can tell this about me, but I'm kind of high energy. I don't really have a watered down version of anything that I do, to be quite honest. So to me, courses answer a specific problem. So it's not delving into consulting and it's not delving into coaching. They are literally answering a specific pain point that somebody has or a information gap that they need to fill. And so that is just information that I can provide. And so that would be very specific and content driven. So it's not fluff. The other thing too is that if you know me as a leader, you know I don't do fluff. I'm not here to, if you want some, I used to tell this to my daughter. She's a semi-professional ice dancer. And sometimes she would get off the rink and she would be upset at something her coach had told her. And I would say, if you want someone to skate around the rink with you and tell you how fabulous you are, I'm your girl, right? But we're not going to pay him to do that, right? So again, I always sort of look at my role as a resource, right? I'm not here to tell you you're amazing, although you probably are, but that's not what you're paying me for. You're paying me for answers to specific problems or guidance in a particular area. And so I don't think I would honestly ever create a course that was watered down.
A lot of coaches talk in vague terms, transformation without a real focus on what transformation actually means. But
Mhm,
you really focus on things like financial management,
mhm.
operation efficiency, strategic planning. Why did you choose specifically those over a broad appeal? And how has that affected who shows up to buy your course, buy your services?
Chose those specifically because that's what my audience required. Those were the conversations that I was having, and those were the gaps that they were articulating to me that they needed to fill. And so that's how that content came about. I will say also as an educator, we're always over planning, over delivering, right? Over planning and over delivering. It's just what we do. It's in our nature. I have been to enough conferences in my lifetime, and hundreds of them, where I left those conferences feeling like this was really great information, right? But it was at this high level that honestly wasn't applicable. So I don't do that. Even when I go speak somewhere, I always tie a workshop to it because I want people to leave after experiencing 45 minutes with me or an hour with me with something applicable that they can take back and they literally can use tomorrow. Time is valuable. I consider time to be our most valuable resource. And if someone in their busy career that really doesn't have time is allocating 45 or 60 minutes to me, it is my duty to ensure that they actually have takeaways that they can actually use.
You've been featured at UPenn's Graduate School of Education, done LinkedIn Lives on executive presence. Now you're running a Substack called Women Leading with Authority. How do you see content and media and all of these things you do on social media as a way
Mhm.
to pre-sale your offers before someone ever gets a chance to do a call with you?
Got you. I use social media as information. So the things that I put on LinkedIn, I'm hoping they're information that people can use, right? I don't have a huge presence on Instagram or Facebook because I'm not using social media as something social, right? I'm using it to deliver content. So that's why a LinkedIn is more valuable for me. A Substack is more valuable for me. I'm new to Substack. I love Substack though. So if you're thinking about getting on Substack, you should get on. It's a really eclectic, interesting group and incredibly supportive. I don't know if that'll change as it grows over the years, but as of right now, it really is. It's a way, and again, I'm in the end of writing a book on delegating for women, and it's a way for me to share content because the book isn't out yet. But I'm so excited about what I'm talking about. I still want to share it. So that's sort of where the Substack has come in.
And UPenn. And UPenn has this master's program in education entrepreneurship. I've interviewed someone on my podcast before, and I'm like, I need to get my book. I need to get my book in their hands so they can make it a part of the curriculum. I hope if anyone from UPenn's listening,
I
holler
have
at
to
me.
tell you, one of the best experiences of my life was being in that room with those women, primarily a room full of women, senior leaders in education, most of them women of color, incredibly passionate, thought-provoking conversations, ready to roll up their sleeves and do the work. They're working in public schools with limited resources, are incredibly articulate and passionate about what they do. Was honestly hands down one of, and I hope someone from UPenn is listening, hands down one of the best experiences I've ever had at a speaking environment as well as a workshop.
For someone who's listening and struggling to create an offer, what's the first thing they need to do to stop or to do? And how does your free brainstorming call fit into your advice?
Okay, that's a good question, two-part question. I would say the first thing that they need to stop doing is rehearsing their resume, right? So a litany of look at me, look at how credentialed I am. That's great. You should be credentialed if you're going to be talking on that subject. That's an expectation, right? So stop just giving that laundry list and start talking about what your client actually needs and what you can solve for that client. Like, what are the pain points you can actually help them with? Right. Because again, their time is valuable and their money is a resource that they're giving. And so again, that's great that you can list all of these things that you've done. But if you can't move the needle for them, your offer is sitting there. It's just going to sit on a shelf, like a book will sit on a shelf. Right.
How does this fit into when you're giving this advice, how does it fit into your free brainstorming call?
So that's exactly what it is. Again, I'm very action oriented, right? So we're not going to spend a lot of time. I'm not going to give you a breakdown on my background, right? Hopefully you've done your research, you've looked at my resume, you've Googled me, whatever you've done. You're going to come to the call knowing that I have this skill set, and so we're going to focus on you. The 30-minute brainstorming call, really, they set the agenda. I don't. So it could be anything that they need it to be honest with you. And the big thing for me is that they have a takeaway at the end, that they have an action item of some kind that they can find useful, whether they contract with me or not.
So I want to throw this out there to you because my boss has said, uh, people don't know what they don't know. She has far more experience than I do. When you are having conversations with women who are in a current position and they're looking to move up, or women who are thinking about moving up, how is it like to really have that conversation and drill in on certain things, especially going back to people don't know what they don't know, and sort of guiding that conversation into getting them to understand, like, this is a line of train of thought to where you may need to go?
So for me, that's where the coaching element comes in, right? Because you're asking open-ended, probing questions, right? When you're a coach, you're not solving a problem for somebody. You're helping them create their own decision framework around what they're struggling with. Right. So that's where that sort of that coaching skill set would come in, where you can help them draw out some of those ideas and some of the things that they're struggling with.
Now, this has been an awesome conversation. A lot of gems have been dropped in here, Leah. Thank you for coming
Hello,
on.
Jims.
A lot of gems.
Here's the thing. If you can't name what's on the other side for somebody, then they don't know what your business is about. So for instance, I'm writing a book on delegating for women, right? If women can't say to themselves after they read this book, I read this book, now I know how to actually delegate with authority and the work will stop coming to my desk. The work I delegated won't come back. If they can't walk away with that, right? They need to know that beforehand, not after. So that's my little gem at the end. People need to know what they're going to get on the other side.
People, y'all need to pay for that one. Uh,
I gotta tell you, interestingly enough, I don't know if you're curious or not, but this entire book stemmed from a client conversation about delegating, and then multiple client conversations around delegating, and then me putting my thoughts on delegating on LinkedIn, and then someone seeing it on LinkedIn and saying, could you create a workshop around that? And then me creating a workshop around that, 150 women showing up, on a Tuesday during lunch when we all know administrators have no free time, right? And then from the workshop, speaking in workshops, and now trickling down into actually writing this book.
Look, I wish you a lot of success with the book. I've sold copies. I have not sold the number I want. Now, I'm not expecting Stephen King, but I do want to sell more books. And I understand that my book is very specific, very niche, and I'm really trying to get it out there, people. I'm trying to. Before we go, what's one mistake you see smart people make when designing their offers that immediately tanks their perceived value?
They don't know their value immediately. They're underselling themselves. When people start, they devalue themselves, right? So and as I like to say to other women leaders, know your worth. When we talk about contract negotiation, I'm constantly saying know your worth, right? And know your value that you bring to the company. And that goes for yourself, right? Know the value that you bring to your business and the value that you're providing your clients, and then price appropriately.
That is all right. Again, Leah, thank you for coming on.
But you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
You are welcome. Now, people, you know how I do this. This podcast episode is going to be on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Simplecast, Stitcher, Spotify, and Audible. I need you to subscribe and to share with your network. And though I'm on all of these platforms, okay, I need you to go to Apple Podcasts, subscribe, listen, because they do check those downloads. Leave me a review and some stars because I'm trying to be found and I'm trying to get Jay-Z on the show because I want him to know that we're doing big things around here. I'd like to thank my guest, Leigh Toomey, for coming on and dropping so many gems, and for you for checking out another episode of the Dr. Will Show. As always, people, invest in you. EDU. Peace.
Educators, change makers, gather around. Yeah. The Dr. Will Show's breaking new ground. Got the wisdom you need, turning knowledge of life. Your cheat code for leveling up, standing proud. Now, here's your host, Dr.